What if the pressure you feel around money right now is not only about how much you have, how much you owe, or how hard you have been working? What if July 7th is acting like a mirror, not to predict your future, but to show you the pattern you keep trying to outwork? There are moments in a year when life gets strangely quiet and strangely loud at the same time. Quiet on the outside, because nothing dramatic may have happened. Loud on the inside, because something you have been avoiding starts speaking in a way you can no longer ignore. Maybe it is the budget you keep rewriting, but never really trusting. Maybe it is the business idea you keep circling without building the structure to hold it. Maybe it is the job that pays the bills but quietly drains your identity. Maybe it is the feeling that you are working harder than ever, but the result still feels too thin for the amount of energy you are spending. July the 7th, 2026, carries the feeling of a mirror date, not as a command, not as a warning, not as a prophecy that something has to happen, but as a symbolic pause point where the same number reflects back on itself. And that reflection can make certain truths harder to avoid. In the wealth space, this kind of mirror does not always ask, "How much money do you have?" Sometimes it asks, "What pattern keeps deciding what money means to you?" Because money is rarely just money. It is safety. It is dignity. It is freedom. It is pressure. It is proof. It is identity. And when a mirror date touches the middle of the year, it can make you feel the distance between the financial life you said you were building and the financial pattern you are actually repeating. And that is where the discomfort begins. You may not be panicking in a loud way. You may still be functioning. You may still be answering messages, paying what you can, making plans, showing up, smiling, working, producing, adjusting. From the outside, your life may look responsible. But inside, there can be a private accounting happening that no one else sees. You start noticing what you keep carrying. You notice the purchases that are not really about desire, but relief. You notice the invoices you're afraid to send because being paid fairly still feels emotionally complicated. You notice the way you say yes to work that exhausts you because a part of you does not fully trust that better opportunities can hold you. You notice how quickly ambition turns into anxiety when the numbers do not move fast enough. And maybe the hardest part is that you have been trying. That is why this season can feel so personal. It would be easier if the problem were laziness. It would be easier if you could point to one bad decision, one missed deadline, one obvious mistake, and say, "That is why I feel this way." But many people reach this point after doing the responsible things. They tried the plan. They tracked the spending. They took the extra shift. They accepted the client. They launched the offer. They made the spreadsheet. They cut back. They stayed disciplined. And still, something feels misaligned. That kind of pressure can make you question your own intelligence. You wonder why the same income still does not feel safe. You wonder why more work does not always create more peace. You wonder why the thing you prayed for, planned for, or sacrificed for now feels heavier than you imagined. You wonder why you keep entering the same financial emotion from different doors. This is where shame tries to enter. Shame says, you should be further by now. Shame says, you should have figured this out already. Shame says, other people know how to do this better. But the mirror of July the 7th does not have to become shame. It can become recognition. It can become the moment you stop treating every financial tension as proof of failure and start reading it as information about the pattern underneath. The frame here is numerology, understood as cycles and value themes, not fortune-telling, not personality labels, not a fixed script over your life. In this space, numbers are treated as symbolic markers of rhythm, repetition, maturation, and timing. They help us notice what the nervous system often feels before the mind can explain it. A mirror date, like July the 7th, brings attention to reflection. The repetition of the number asks you to look again. In a wealth season, that looking again often touches value. What you value, what you undervalue, what you overpay for emotionally, what you undercharge for financially, what you keep funding because it protects an old identity, what you keep avoiding because it would require a new one. This is not a random kind of reflection. It is the kind that reveals the difference between movement and alignment. You can be busy and still be misaligned. You can be earning and still be leaking. You can be disciplined and still be building on a structure that no longer matches who you are becoming. That is the quiet truth many people do not want to face in the middle of the year. By July, the fantasy of the new year has worn off. The motivational language has thinned. The first burst of ambition has met real life. Rent still came. Groceries still rose. Clients still delayed. Family needs still appeared. The body still needed rest. The calendar still filled up. And suddenly, the question is no longer, what do I want this year to become? The question becomes, what is this year revealing about the way I handle value? Historically, numerology has roots in ancient systems that treated numbers as more than counting tools. In Greek and Pythagorean traditions, numbers were connected to harmony, proportion, music, and the hidden order beneath visible life. In ancient Egyptian and other philosophical traditions, number symbolism often carried ideas of rhythm, structure, and cosmic pattern. The point was not to reduce a person to a digit. The deeper idea was that life has arrangement. Life has sequence. Life has repeating forms. That matters because wealth also moves in sequence. Money patterns rarely appear from nowhere. They are often built through repetition. The repeated yes when you meant no. The repeated underpricing because you feared rejection. The repeated emergency because no margin was created. The repeated resentment because your labor became expected but not honored. The repeated expansion before the foundation could hold it. This is why a mirror date can feel emotional. It does not create the pattern. It reveals the pattern you are already living inside. You can see this in personal life when someone keeps earning more but never feels safer. Their income rises, but so do their obligations, their lifestyle, their quiet guilt. and their fear of disappointing people. On paper, they are progressing. Internally, they are still living from scarcity. The number changed. The pattern did not. You can see it in a small business owner who keeps chasing new visibility while avoiding the back end. More posts, more offers, more ideas, more urgency. But the invoices are late. The pricing is unclear. The boundaries are soft. And every growth moment creates a new kind of chaos. The business does not need more noise. It needs structure that respects the value being created. You can see it across culture whenever people confuse constant productivity with financial wisdom. A society can praise hustle while entire nervous systems become exhausted. People can monetize every skill, every hobby, every spare hour, and still feel behind. The issue is not always effort. Sometimes the issue is a value system that teaches people to prove worth through output while ignoring recovery, sustainability, and long-term capacity. You can even see it in public business stories where rapid growth created visibility before stability. Companies expand too quickly, hire too quickly, promise too quickly, and then spend the next season restructuring what ambition outran. The lesson is not that growth is bad. The lesson is that expansion without integration creates a bill that eventually comes due. This is why July the 7th can feel like an inner audit, not a punishment, an audit. An audit does not exist to shame the numbers. It exists to reveal what is true. And in your life, that truth may be simple but uncomfortable. You may be realizing that the way you earn is no longer aligned with the way you want to live. You may be realizing that your money goals were built from survival, not clarity. You may be realizing that you have been using income to soothe a deeper fear of instability. You may be realizing that your generosity has become a leak. You may be realizing that your ambition needs a cleaner container. The mirror does not ask you to panic. It asks you to stop pretending. Because pretending is expensive. Pretending you are fine when the numbers are speaking costs energy. Pretending the job does not drain you costs health. Pretending the client relationship is fair costs confidence. Pretending the spending is harmless costs trust. Pretending the plan is working when your body knows it is not costs self-respect. And this is where the cycle can begin to change. Not through one dramatic move, not through a reckless quit, not through a forced reinvention, because a date on the calendar felt meaningful. The change begins through observation that is honest enough to be useful. Around July the 7th, you can look at what keeps repeating without turning it into a character trial. You can notice the financial conversation you keep delaying. You can notice the number you avoid opening. You can notice the part of your work that drains more than it returns. You can notice where your pricing still reflects an old version of your confidence. You can notice where your giving has become a strategy for being needed. You can notice where your fear of instability has made you loyal to situations that are no longer stable anyway. That noticing matters, because a pattern that stays unnamed will keep asking for your energy. One of the most grounded ways to work with this mirror is to separate financial pressure from financial identity. Pressure is a signal. Identity is the story you build from the signal. A bill is a bill. A low month is a low month. A delayed payment is a delayed payment. But the moment your mind says, "This means I am failing," the pressure becomes heavier than the actual number. You are allowed to respond to the number without becoming the number. You are allowed to adjust without collapsing. You are allowed to admit something is not working without turning that admission into proof that nothing will. The next movement is to look for the structure behind the stress. Many people try to fix money anxiety by making more money, and sometimes more income is necessary. But more income does not automatically repair a broken structure. If the structure is overgiving, more money often creates more people to rescue. If the structure is avoidance, more money creates more room to avoid. If the structure is unclear pricing, more demand creates more resentment. If the structure is emotional spending, more income creates more permission to self-soothe through purchases that never touch the real need. So the question becomes quieter and more powerful. What structure would make peace easier to maintain? Not what would make life look impressive, not what would make other people approve, not what would let you perform success. What would make peace easier to maintain? Maybe that means one clean money review each week instead of daily panic. Maybe it means sending the invoice before resentment builds. Maybe it means raising a rate slowly and responsibly, not as a performance of confidence, but as an alignment with reality. Maybe it means choosing fewer offers and building one properly. Maybe it means telling someone you cannot keep absorbing a cost just because you have always absorbed it. The mirror of July the 7th supports this kind of adjustment because its energy is not frantic. 7 often carries the symbolic tone of reflection, inquiry, inner truth, and discernment. Doubled, that tone can feel like the question behind the question. It is not only, how do I make more? It is, what am I finally ready to understand about the way I relate to value? And that understanding may be tender. You may discover that money became proof that you were safe because safety did not feel consistent earlier in life. You may discover that achievement became your way of asking the world to respect you. You may discover that undercharging was not only a business issue, but a belonging issue. You may discover that overspending was not a discipline issue alone, but a nervous system reaching for comfort. You may discover that you have been trying to build wealth while still carrying an identity trained for survival. That does not mean you are broken. It means the pattern has history. And when a pattern has history, it needs more than pressure. It needs language, patience, structure, and repeated choices that teach your life a new rhythm. This is where Auris intelligence becomes relevant as a doorway, not a doctrine. Your birthday, your timing patterns, your repeated themes, and the dates that keep feeling meaningful may become starting points for deeper recognition. Not because they guarantee an outcome, not because they prove destiny, but because symbolic timing can help you notice what your life has been trying to say in fragments. The point is not to worship the date. The point is to hear the mirror. July the 7th can be held as a moment to ask what your financial life is reflecting back. Where is effort no longer enough because the structure needs to mature? Where are you confusing urgency with direction? Where are you chasing expansion before repairing the leak? Where are you making money decisions from the old fear instead of the present reality? The body often knows before the spreadsheet does. You feel the tightening before you open the account. You feel the resentment before you admit the agreement is unfair. You feel the dread before the work begins. You feel the false excitement of a purchase that is really an escape. You feel the exhaustion of chasing more when your system is asking for cleaner rhythm. Those feelings are not financial plans. They are signals. They need interpretation, not immediate obedience. But when you ignore them long enough, they become louder. A mirror date simply gives you permission to listen. The transformation here is subtle. You may not become a different person overnight. You may not solve every number in one sitting. You may not suddenly feel fearless about wealth, pricing, spending, debt, saving, or growth. But something changes when you stop treating your financial life as a scoreboard and start treating it as a pattern field. Before, every pressure point felt like a verdict. After, pressure becomes information. Before, you needed the numbers to validate your worth. After, you can look at the numbers without handing them authority over your identity. Before, you pushed harder because slowing down felt dangerous. After, you understand that sustainable wealth is not built only by force. It is built by rhythm, structure, discernment, and the courage to stop funding patterns that keep draining the future. This is the gift of the July 7th mirror. It does not promise ease. It does not remove responsibility. It does not tell you what comes next. It simply brings the reflection close enough for you to see what effort alone has not been able to fix. And once you see it, you can respond differently. Not dramatically, honestly. What is one money pattern July the 7th is asking you to finally look at without shame? The way you earn, the way you spend, the way you give, the way you price, or the way you measure your own value. The mirror does not change your life for you. It shows you where your life has been asking for a more honest structure. If this gave language to something you have been feeling, but could not explain, share it with someone who keeps blaming themselves for a pattern they may simply need to understand. Subscribe for more Prophecy Pulse teachings on timing, cycles, and human patterns. And when you are ready to explore your own symbolic timing intelligence, visit